Okay, we are live.
Great. Good morning, everybody. It is now, what time is it? 9:55, and I will call the Sewage and Water Board Strategy Committee meeting to order. Special counsel, please call the roll.
Director Barnes,
Here.
Director Scholas,
Here.
Director Howard,
Here.
Director Antrim.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Chair.
Terrific. We have one presentation item today, and just as a note, it's a continuation of our discussion on stormwater fees, which we have been talking about. So we had an in-depth conversation at our last meeting, last quarter. We're going to continue that with some more information and some more updates. So staff and consultants, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Ron Spooner, the Interim Executive Director. We're glad to provide Strategy Committee an update on our drainage fee development. Our team consists of myself, our CFO will give a quick briefing on the current funding and obligations, followed by our GSO, Steve. He'll talk somewhat about the deferred capital needs and the reason for the stormwater fee. We'll have our team from Raftellus, the nationally recognized experts on the development and implementation of the stormwater fee, followed by a brief slide on legal with the ballot initiative process, and I'll follow up in the end with looking ahead and our path forward. So as we start, quick general overview. Again, the Sewage and Water Board has been handling drainage for the city of New Orleans for more than a century. 1899, that's over 120, that's probably 126 years. With that comes an aging infrastructure. Our system is complex and includes everything from catch basins to drainage pump stations. As you can see, the drainage system is composed of two major categories: our major drainage system and a minor drainage system. The major drainage system consists of 100 miles of open canals, 100 miles of closed canals, and also drain lines 36 inches in diameter and larger. We have 24 drainage pump stations composed of 120 drainage pumps and 11 underpass stations. As you can see, for our minor system, which we started this January, it's all consolidated. We have 1,600 miles of small diameter drain lines, and those are drain lines less than 36 inches in diameter, 46,350 catch basins, and 46,250 drain manholes, and 72,000 catch basins. Again, for the public, per our revised statute 334072B1, the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans shall be responsible for all drainage operations within the city of New Orleans. So again, one last note, our system is unique and the issues are unique. So unlike many communities, this is evident by the significant investment made by the federal government through our SELA program, which is our Southeast Louisiana Urban Flood Control Program, to address local drainage issues. This has really been a huge help for Sewage and Water Board and the citizens of New Orleans. Quick on our historical funding is that, as you know, the Sewage and Water Board relies primarily on property taxes to support our drainage system. While the costs and costs for operations and maintenance have increased over time, the utility has not gained a new source of revenue from drainage since 1982. Back in the 1990s, the voters rejected the renewal of a property tax used to support the minor drainage system. And this is not Sewage and Water Board's first attempt at a drainage fee. We did attempt that in the 1990s and the 1980s to implement a drainage fee that would provide additional revenue for our drainage system. Both efforts failed. For decades, there's been a pattern of underfunding for the drainage system. Where does this leave us today? Relying on an aging and deteriorating system to provide critical drainage services. Underinvesting in the drainage system over the years has resulted in deferred capital maintenance and shifted the financial burden to current customers. And turn it over to our CFO.
Thanks, Ron. This slide, just the strategy committee, depicts our current funding and obligations, and I think it's just a call to action for the fiscal responsibility needed, and it depicts the imbalance in how the utility is funded currently. So we show on the left-hand side the three enacted taxes. Two of the three expire within the next 5 to 7 years. There's not a reliable funding source that you could do bonding on, you could do planning. So each year this is not new information. We've talked about this in our budget cycle since I've been here 4 years. We talked about this in the millage roll forward requests, which did not occur this past quadrennial. So as we look at what we have and what we've been doing, we're just imbalanced because of the obligations on the right. So we have to take our rate revenue through the millage. We have to pay our O&M to keep the system going. For the major drainage, it's $47.6 million. We have to meet debt service. And then whatever's left is really what we talk about as what we do with capital. As Ron mentioned, SELA is a major program that's taken between $7.5 and $13.5 million. We did get some relief recently, happily, on the Uptown payback to reduce that. So short-term have a little bit of more flexibility, but there is another SELA payback coming into play in the next couple of years for Florida Avenue. So SELA is a very beneficial, large program, but there is cost sharing. This payback was 35% cost share. Algiers program, we cost share 25%. So there is real financial commitments that have to be met to continue with SELA. After that, we take whatever's left and we think of cash financing capital improvements, $4 to7 million. Work with the GSO's team. It's just not sufficient to do anything as meaningful as the long list. So we have a 10-year CIP program over $900 million. So clearly we should be spending more. Any benchmark that we look at, 10% of the assets in the field, we're well short of that. And then the last piece is the new minor system, same issue, funding sources not equal to the needed cost recovery to spend 25 to 40 million. So definitely from my perspective, we see this as a call to action, time to act, looking forward for decades to have a reliable funding source that you could do bonding, get large scale capital programs in place. But to do that, we need net revenues to meet the debt service requirement for that bonding. So that's why we're here talking about this. And I think on the next slide, Steve's going to pick up with a little bit more on the same topic.
Yeah, this slide is intended to be a snapshot of what an average year looks like for us in terms of funding and what do we do with the funds that we receive. In a standard year, we obtain about 72 to 75 million in annual drainage revenues. Of that, the vast majority of it goes to O&M of the major drainage system and then existing debt service on past capital projects. So the O&M is the power to run the pumps, the gas to run the turbines, to provide power to the pumps, the operators at the pumps, the cutting of the canal grass in New Orleans East that we have, and then those other things that just provide some basic levels of service. So the size of the pie hasn't changed. I think if I recall correctly, the last new millage was passed in 1982. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then a millage fell off in 91, which was related to small diameter drainage. We took that on in January. I think that's appropriate. It's helpful. It's good. But what that does is it leaves us in a situation where we have a very limited amount for capital improvements. And those capital improvements allow us to go from a reactive footing to a proactive footing, going from having to wait until something breaks to being able to replace it on a set schedule within its expected life. And within that $12 to $15 million in capital improvements, the SELA program, which has been very helpful in getting us to a proactive place. They've done some major projects uptown. They're doing some really, really good work in Algiers, which we saw a 100-year rainfall event this spring. That needs to continue, but that has a serious effect on the amount of capital funding we have, and that's set into a baked schedule. There are studies that have to be done. There are benefit cost analyses that have to be completed, and so the map of those projects is pretty well set. That leaves us $4 to $7 million to maintain one of the most complicated drainage systems, certainly in the country, maybe on planet Earth. And so the next slide is I don't want to get too into the weeds. As an engineer, I can get pretty pedantic pretty quickly. And I want to be sure that our customers are able to understand the effects of these capital projects and the importance. The project on the left, we talked about before, I think these are the discharge bells. This is where water comes out of pump station 7. This pumps much of Lakeview. I don't know if you can see it, but there are pilings there in the water, and you can see the scale of this. Those are, workers there in the lower left. These are huge pieces of equipment. Those are pumping 1,000 cubic feet per second. That's a massive amount of water. Well, the discharge bells, you can see them floating in space. They're supposed to be resting on these piles. If the bells fall off of the pump station, I can't pull a prime, which means I can't run the pumps, which is a serious, serious problem for residents of Lakeview. That has an immediate effect. The discharge piping at Station 15, that's in New Orleans East. You can see water kind of spewing out of that pipe there. We have been maintaining that, and you can see some of the patchwork there on that pipe. Our welders have welded that over and over and over again, and we're at a place where we have to replace those pipes, but we have limited capital funding. And the effect that that has is that some customers in more rural areas of New Orleans East, we have at times limited capacity. The trash racks, this is in Algiers, these screen cleaners remove the water hyacinth that comes down the canal. So if we can't keep the canal clear and the screens clear, the pumps don't run as efficiently. So it's hard, it's easy to get wrapped up in the specifics, but each one of these are just examples of some of the nearly $1 billion in capital investment that we need over the next 10 years. Yes?
Quick question, just in terms of, to understand the scale, do you know approximately how much it would cost to fix those 2 discharge bells?
Yeah, so this is an illustration. The discharge bells at 7 are probably in a similar condition to discharge bells at Station 1,
Sure.
which drains uptown, Station 2, which is mid-city, 3, which is, takes the water from 2. So there's probably $15 to $25 million worth of work that needs to be done on the discharge bells alone. But again, they're there, they're functioning, and so we're utilizing capital funds to address the pumps that go down on a regular basis. But what a stormwater fee would help us to do is to be able to go into a proactive footing, not have to wait to get to these places, but be able to do these repairs within that life cycle.
Yeah.
What we don't have a photograph here of, but I wanted to mention here is that minor drainage, pipes under 36 inches. Everyone knows what this looks like. We drive down certain boulevards and streets. You can see the water ponding in the curbs. We see the street, the block by block flooding. I am thoroughly convinced that now that the power complex is coming online, Turbine 4 is going to be retired this year, thankfully. And again, big shout out to our city partners, our state partners, the folks, our board members for prioritizing this. That program is huge. The next big step for us is keeping that minor system clear. And a stormwater fee allows us some flexibility here. This is just a table of some of the funding. We need between $25 and $40 million on an annual basis to maintain 20% of the system, which is the industry average. New Orleans is a little more unique, so I would love to see us get to 30 to 40% a year. That $25 to $40 million, the original estimate we had for this year is about 18.9, just shy of $19 million. Not quite there at the 25, but again, the city has really helped us. The state put together these revenues for traffic camera devices. The fair share funding has been transferred to the Sewerage and Water Board along with the system. That's all very helpful, but if we look at 2026 and beyond and what we've received for this year, there are one-time monies in there, that 2024 traffic camera revenues and the ARPA one-time monies that we're only going to see once. And then the special fair share allocation, there's question as to where that will come from. That's a really important part. We do have a meeting with the city and look forward to working with them on addressing that, but have not yet received those monies, as well as the recurring traffic enforcement devices. That's a challenging revenue stream for us to rely on an annual basis. Yes?
So in doing the math, and we saw this at the Finance Committee meeting, that's approximately $11 million.
Correct.
That we don't have this year alone,
Right.
right? And it may go down a little bit depending on the traffic enforcement.
That's
of the
correct.
Situation.
Yes.
It's not going to go down 100%.
Correct.
So
Yes. Not going to go down 100%.
So every year we essentially run a deficit in drainage.
Well, run a deficit, or we're not able to
Or we're not
clean
able.
as much of the system as we need to. We don't have a budget excess elsewhere that we'll be able to apply. But this is where a stormwater fee provides, not the whole answer, this is part of it. And again, thanks to those partners there. But to be able to augment this and address people's felt need, that's
And a
street
reminder,
flooding.
that's just maintenance, that's not.
That's just maintenance.
That's not capital improvements.
Not capital improvements, that's correct.
We're not doing we're not replacing any catch basins, we're not fixing anything, we're just cleaning and,
There are O&M point repairs in there, so, you know, and we have several hundred of those already. We did issue a change order for Drennan, but there are capital repairs that need to happen on a large-scale basis. So, as an illustration, the box that runs down Broad Street, it's 25 feet wide, 15 feet tall. I got down into that box, and the drainage canals there are pile supported, the streets are not. And so a capital program, every last one of those inlets is level or may have a transverse slope. A capital
Water has to go
program,
up,
that's right. So
which it doesn't like to do.
water has a habit of flowing downhill every single time. So a stormwater fee, again, allows us to get into a proactive stance and provide a higher level of service for our customers.
So Steve, oh, go ahead, I'm finished, I'm
Yeah,
done.
one more question on this slide. I apologize if I missed it during finance administration, but what is the $5 million special fair share? How does that differ from the other fair share money?
So there's a resolution, Gray, was it 30246?
I think it's 34609 was. the
34609,
ordinance
thank you.
with the fair share identified 5 million that would be allocated annually. And the city council discussed dedicating that to minor drainage. The city indicated that was paid in fiscal 24-23 with the 25% of their IMF funds. So it's a question about what's the source of the funding, but we understood pretty clearly that the extra additional 5 million for the IMF was going to be dedicated to minor drainage.
So the city passed a resolution saying that they were going to give us this $5 million on an annual basis, but we're not sure where it's going to come from.
Yes, it's a little unclear, and this was, I think, discussed after the ordinance occurred in March of '24, as to, you know, have a clear path. So each year, this could be put into the budget, and each year it could be a recurring 5 million to the minor drainage. At this point, we don't have clarity there, so that's why we're following up with
They
this.
promised it to us, but they don't know where it's going to come from necessarily.
I'll follow with Ray, as he indicated during F&A committee. We are meeting with the city next week.
Yeah, okay.
On further discussions of finance. And so from the Sewage and Water Board standpoint of view, the city has been working with us, CAO office. We will meet with them next week on a further discussion of this topic, and we'll see where it goes. So just to let the public know, we are in good communication with the city. Discussion is we do know how tight funding is on both sides, Sewage and Water Board and the City of New Orleans side. So again, we are going to meet with them again and always meet with them again to see where we can go on this issue.
Director Schultz, did you have?
I did. So the fact that we have things that are pressing needs that we are struggling to maintain, what happens, like say something, one of those drainage things goes sideways and we have to do something and it's not in our budget, what's the process to actually get that paid for, because it's a required thing that we don't necessarily have?
If it's an emergency, if an emergency is declared, which we do have unanticipated emergencies, then that's where that would come. So we would get with CFO, we'll find the funds to keep us operational. But again, those emergency funds, those funds used for emergency repair takes away from our normal day-to-day activities.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
One last question. If $15 million were to appear out of nowhere, would that be sufficient to meet our needs?
On a recurring, well, on a recurring annual basis? Would it meet our needs? I don't know that it would meet our entire needs, but it would certainly be helpful
For maintenance.
for maintenance. On the O&M side of things, are we talking small diameter, large diameter, or both?
If we just had $15 million a year for drainage,
I would say, Tyler, any additional infusion of funds would help the Sewage and Water Board where we are. $50 million, you know, and there's a documentation say to properly manage and maintain the overall system, you're gonna need more than $15 million. But to answer your question, $15 million is,
One more dollar would be helpful, but would it be sufficient to meet our needs today?
I don't
No.
think 15 million alone
No.
is going to be adequate to meet. the
Well, and to your point earlier, the minimum industry standard is 20% of the
Right.
system, but we're such a unique city that that's probably not enough.
No.
And so, you know, the question is, what should our goal be? Is it 30? Is it beyond? And what's the cost of that? And it's probably more than 15.
and I would say that's what we're studying in our financial models. The range could be from 30 to $60 million, close to the $50 million range on an annual basis. So, and then that's nothing new, okay? So there are studies in the past have said, you know, if we get an infusion of $40 to $60 million on an annual basis to be used for overall drainage systems, then that would keep us proactive and keep us to maintain the existing system and also replace some of the aging infrastructure.
Great, okay.
Okay, Steve?
All right. Last slide for myself. The drainage fee provides fairness. So we're talking about proactive work, increased level of service. As we've talked about, the drainage system is funded by tax revenues, by millages. And there are a large number of users of the system who do not pay taxes. They're tax exempt. A stormwater fee would bring those entities into the fold and allow them to contribute to a system that they are benefiting from. It would allow the Sewage and Water Board to improve the level of service that we have. So we were talking about small diameter drainage. Being able, Tyler, you mentioned $15 million. If I had 15 million more to clean drain lines, to Director Barnes's point, yeah, we would absolutely clean some, maybe every 6 months, depending on leaf load and amount of debris and some of those other things. It would allow us to provide more meaningful support of the operations and maintenance of the drainage system. New Orleans East, we would cut the canals along Morrison much more frequently. We would remove water hyacinth at a higher level. And I would be remiss if I didn't make a special point of mentioning an expanded partnership in the role of green infrastructure. It's not necessarily the Sewage and Water Board would take this over, but there are many experts in this space, some of whom who are in this room, others who are calling in, and many neighborhood organizations that a stormwater fee, it's not about us controlling everything, it's about us working with those entities who have been doing this, understand it, and providing resources, collaboration, and support for this. And I think that's something that a stormwater fee in that space of fairness allows us to move forward with in a meaningful way. With that, I would hand it over to Raf Tellis, who I believe is on the line.
Yes, thanks, Steve. My name is Henrietta Lockley. I'm the Senior Vice President with Raftelis. We've met before virtually and in person. And as Ron mentioned, Raftelis is one of the largest and most experienced firms in utility finance and management. And our team has helped implement over 75 stormwater and drainage fees. And I'm here with my colleagues, Nora McKinley, who's a consultant with Raftelis, and Keith Redling, who's an executive vice president. And his experience includes setting up some of the first drainage fees in the South and in the country. On the next slide, Steve began to talk about a drainage fee. And so here's a little bit more detail about what we're talking about as a supplemental funding source here. The industry standard is to charge a user fee based on impervious area or hard surface area. And that's because it's a major factor in the cost causation for drainage in New Orleans. For controlling, in particular, large volumes of stormwater runoff and also water quality, because impervious area impedes infiltration of stormwater into the ground. The unit of charge, this ERU, which is kind of like our unit of charge in the potable water world of like a per 1,000 gallons type of idea, is this equivalent residential unit, which is an impervious area amount that's on a typical single family property. Single family properties are pretty homogeneous, and so it's typical to use a simplified structure to charge them. in this case, we suggest a series of 3 flat rates called tiers that recognizes the variety and impervious area across the city on single-family lots, but keeps administration costs down. So properties with the smallest impervious areas on the residential side would pay a portion of an ERU. Properties with the typical impervious area would pay 1 ERU, and so on. And then for other properties, which vary widely in their impervious area, think of, large institutions in the city, small businesses, they would be charged 1 or more units of impervious area or ERUs, and that would be based on their measured hard surface area. And so that means, for example, a property with 10 times the impervious area of a single family property would be charged 10 times more than that single family property. And that helps with equity within the system. A typical drainage fee also includes a credits program that recognizes the investments of private properties to control water quantity and quality. And we've implemented this type of program all over the city, which allows for a reduction in fees for those properties. And it also provides, stronger legal basis for the fee, meaning that a customer's fee can be reduced with action by that customer. We also include an affordability program within our thinking for a drainage fee in New Orleans. As we heard from Stephen and others, New Orleans has a significant need for revenues. And so we know that, with a new significant amount of revenue, that taxes or fees needed to support that would be significant as well. And many customers may not be able to meet that increased fee. And so we envision an affordability program to help alleviate some of that burden. On the next slide, you'll be able to see some of the options that we've been considering throughout the months of considering drainage funding. And, our intent is to balance some of these many factors within the city that influence how feasible a particular solution could be. So currently, you can see the first option is the drainage system receives the most support via taxes and millages, and this has been notwithstanding the the millages that were not renewed has been a stable revenue source with benefits and public approval. But a big drawback, as Stephen mentioned, is that properties that are currently exempt from taxes don't contribute to drainage revenues. When used as one part of funding, millages are, not unfair, but when they're used as the only source of revenue and some properties don't contribute, it kind of limits the fairness of this approach. Another option could be to move to a fee funding only structure, which is the second option shown. This is used in some other jurisdictions, and under this case, the millages would expire and we would transition to a drainage fee only. A complete shift to fee funding is not likely to work well for New Orleans. However, it's beyond the capacity of user fees alone to fund drainage needs, and relying only on fee funding doesn't recognize the relationship between property value and the protection from drainage issues that is obtained for a property from a properly functioning system. And a fee-only structure would also disproportionately impact some properties that would see a sudden and very great change to their fee. Those are properties with high impervious area and low assessed value. I'm getting a network issue on my side. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, and then the final scenario shown on this slide is the preferred solution. It would use a combination of fees and taxes, and that would mean that we would keep millages imposed on taxpayers and impose a fee on all properties to collect revenue, particularly from those properties that are not currently contributing. And, this has the advantages that are kind of outweighing the drawbacks described with the one or the other options that I talked about on this slide. However, one drawback is it's a little bit more complicated to communicate to our public, but it provides increased stability and fairness. The calculation under this approach is envisioned as everyone would have a calculated drainage fee, and then customers who are currently paying taxes would have their fees offset by the amount of drainage taxes they're paying, meaning that their final net fee is calculated as the difference between those two, and that would be calculated for each individual customer. So that means that customers that are paying now a high amount towards drainage fees wouldn't see much or any change in their burden, and the fee would be able to equalize the contribution for properties that are not currently paying any taxes towards drainage.
Why is this?
I
why is this
have a
preferred?
question.
Yes.
So I don't understand how this affects renters. Because the tax status is gonna affect the building owner, and I'm thinking of something like a multifamily apartment kind of complex that'll have a pretty relatively high impervious surface area. The taxes will be incurred by the owner, but then these fees would in theory go to the actual renters, and there wouldn't be an offset for them to actually, I'm just confused as how this would work with a renter versus somebody that owned the property.
The fees would go to the owner of the property.
And, but the actual, so the fee wouldn't be paid by the renter?
No,
Not by the renter, by the.
Property
by the property owner.
Okay,
These are all property.
all
owner
property
properties. Yes, sir.
owner,
Yes, sir.
okay. Go ahead, Janet.
I am confused by why 3 is preferred. I'm not understanding why the drainage fee, which everyone has to pay, isn't the preferred way.
Yeah,
Can-
it has to do with
go ahead.
the revenue impacts and the customers that are most impacted. So a key aspect of this is to keep the affordability issue intact and keep as many people on a level basis. If you go to a fee only, while you might be able to raise the revenue you need, you're redistributing the burden. That doesn't make sense to us as we studied this with Raftellus.
I'd like to,
Well, I
go
also think,
more into
like,
this.
the next step here is to really dig into these numbers,
Yeah.
right? So
And-
we're not at this point today
Yes, and then,
ready to kind of, like, because
That
I
is-
think we're gonna show this analysis in
and
numbers. like-
that is correct, and you've got ahead of our next slide, so
Yeah.
we'll answer that question on the next slide.
We're coming.
The next few slides.
okay.
Go ahead, Henrietta.
Yeah, I think we can go to the next
Okay.
slide. Thank you, Ron. So I'll just emphasize, I think, also in response to your question that including the property taxes and a fee balances a lot of competing needs and limitations and considerations of impacts to customers. It means that tax exempt properties would begin to pay into the system, and that and also envisioned under this math would be that residential properties that qualify for the homestead exemption would receive an offset as well to help limit negative impacts to them. In terms of implementation, I think this kind of gets at an earlier question that one of the board members had, is that connecting the drainage fee to property taxes. So balancing these two relies on a connection between and the accuracy of the property assessment data. So it's just an implementation consideration. And then lastly, again, as we've talked about through this presentation, the revenue needs are significant for the drainage program. And so it's likely that we would need a period to ramp up the implementation of the fee to the amount of revenues that we actually require to adequately run the drainage system, but also kind of limit extreme impacts to customers over time. This would give customers a time to adjust to the new fee and time to make sure that we have the affordability program working really well for customers. So now I'll hand it over to legal to talk about the process.
Good morning, committee. My name is Theron Levi Baquet. This is just a brief overview of what the procedural pathway to implementing the stormwater fee would look like. We would continue what we're doing now, which is developing the rate proposal, working with Raftellus and internal staff. This is all governed by Louisiana Revised Statute 3890.17, and that actually requires us 30 days prior to any official action on rates to hold at least 3 public hearings on the proposal. We would communicate what our intent is, solicit feedback from the public, and we have to record all of that in transcripts, which we then are required to deliver to all of our approving authorities at least 20 days prior to any official action. Those approving authorities are the Board of Liquidation City Debt, the New Orleans City Council, and the Louisiana State Bond Commission. So the official action, that kind of mile marker, is the resolution that the Board of Directors would issue that would lay out what the rate proposal looks like. It would declare our intent to bring it to the public through a vote, and to also seek the approval of those approving authorities. So once that resolution is issued, we would make application to these approving entities. We would go through the process of, receiving comment and ultimately approval from those. We would then have to file public notice of our proposition between 45 and 90 days before the date of an election. And of course, these election dates are preset by the Louisiana Secretary of State. Once we make that notice, our final move would be to actually hold the vote. And in that ballot measure, we lay out what this would look like, what we reasonably estimate to collect, and how long this fee would, be in place.
And we would also have more than the 3 public hearings. The law requires us to have 3, but of course, we usually have meetings in every councilmatic district, so we normally have up to 7 hearings.
And so this looks like a 90-day process and that process is, so I understand, it starts with a resolution from the board, or it starts before that?
The legal process would start with the public hearings on the proposal. So once we internally develop that proposal, we would communicate that to the public.
And we would say it's much longer than a 90-day process from
Yeah.
start to
Longer.
finish. So, yeah, it's looking at 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
And also, this doesn't include, the strategy committee meetings,
Got it.
a lot of opportunities
right.
beyond the public hearings for the public to engage in public
I think
comment.
one would be 6 to 9 months alone, and then
Hopefully not, one is not 6 to 9 months. Yeah.
But this is the rate proposal, but if it's keeping a millage in place, there has to be an accompanying plan for that, because one expires in 27, the other one in
Yes.
31. So what's going on in
And-
terms of
and-
that?
And that's part of, let me go to the next slide. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's like we're the plant.
Thanks, and part of, like to say, we look forward to the permanent executive director coming in, Randy Heyman. And his date coming in late July. He's joined us from Philadelphia Water Department. He's currently the CEO there. He's been there for 6 years as CEO. And Philadelphia Water Department does have a stormwater management fee in place. And, we're looking forward to Randy to share his knowledge and expertise in his area. So we will continue through Q3 of this year to develop and refine that fee structure, what we talked about. So, which will include some combination property taxes and drainage fees. So to answer your question, Ms. Howard, currently we are analyzing several financial models. I mean, at this point in time, we are, I can say 10 and greater. So it's not a straightforward process, is what we're trying to do. Number one, we want to make sure, we haven't made a final determination at this point in time because we're still reviewing those various financial models, but we do believe that the combination approach that what we're recommending to the board at this point is the most fair and the most equitable approach in what we can distribute this fee. We also plan to reach out to our key partners and our stakeholders for feedback and input during this phase. And again, I just want to reiterate the recommendation, accommodation where we are is really for fairness and affordability. That's what's guiding this process. And again, back to when Tyler said the minimum value, and in part of what Raftellus had in their presentation, is to ramp small and then ramp our way up over a certain period of time because we want to make this program to be affordable to our customers. Again, we'll continue to meet with our community leaders as well as the business groups. And again, we anticipate having a fee structure by the end of the year. Once approved by the end of the year, and we will bring it to the board for the review and approval. Once this proposed rate is approved by the board, then we will begin an extensive public outreach engagement, an education effort for a potential ballot initiative, which includes sharing with the public why a fee is important, how the drainage fee would be used, as we've touched a little bit in this presentation, and how and it can increase the level of service, which is key. We really need to increase the level of service on the drainage side with the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans to provide our customers with that level of service. And that concludes this presentation, and open up for questions from the strategy committee meeting.
Yeah.
I think the board needs to be involved in the development phase of this, not just have something brought to them. This is a major policy issue, and which way you go on these, for example, is something that should be discussed.
Duly noted, ma'am. Absolutely.
Is there a mechanism, and the answer might be no, for people that are exempt or not included in current fee structure to sort of opt in and say, you know, hey, I know we're using a lot of resources and we're not currently paying. We have the capacity to do that. Can they do that outside of this process and sort of add revenue to the system if they chose?
Not aware of any type of opt-in situation where.
I mean, not that anybody would. I'm saying, I'm saying that because my thought is that we have some community partners that might be willing, as a demonstration of how important they think this is, or how much they support it, to sort of preemptively participate in a system that they've been exempted out of. But
I think we'd cash their check if they wanted to write us one, but I don't think that any of the
Do it.
large exempt property owners in the city are waiting in line to write us a check.
mm-hmm.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions?
Any more questions or discussion? So I just want to acknowledge that there is a difference between sort of the legal process, which you so clearly laid out, and what we need to do as a board. And, you know, we made a commitment at the last strategy meeting to have this be the primary issue for the strategy committee to deal with. We technically meet quarterly, but we could meet more frequently. And I think, you know, this is probably my last meeting because my term is up, unfortunately. But I do think that now, you know, we have Raftellus that is working really hard on this. There are lots of opportunities for engagement on the board, and the more we do that through committee meetings, the more we can also invite the public and have lots of public comment. We're really appreciative of everybody that's here today, and we know that there's a lot of people who are streaming as well. This is the way we want it. So please continue to come to our meetings. I just want to thank the board, the staff, and Raftellus. Thank you so much for such a great and complete presentation. But before we stop, are there any public comments? Great. You guys ready?
Do you have a? Yeah. I haven't finished completely writing it yet.
We know you
My name is
we know
Joey
you can do
Algier.
it.
Thank you. Joey Algier. I work with the Water Collaborative. If you're unfamiliar, we have also been doing a little bit more of the community side and research and a couple national partners around stormwater fees. And especially, thank you so much, Steve, for the incorporation of the green infrastructure and the voice of the community has been amazing. So there's a lot of excitement for me from Raf Tillis. I had just a few, the main question was, I think, to get to the specific point, if there was any information currently from Raf Tillis around what the measurement of the ERU would be or the pricing of that, just in terms of, I know it's still early, but if there was something of the way that they were going to move about accessing that sort of data.
I would say we are still analyzing that data, and that's helping us refine our financial models. Once we refine that data, bring it back to our board of directors, then we'll definitely release it to the public.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the other financial models, are there other cities that you're looking at that have been like examples? I mean, especially with the new director coming in from.
Well, Philadelphia Water is one, but I would
Yeah.
say if Raf Tillis, there are nationally recognized experts who's actually developed and implemented stormwater fees for various cities. So if you want a specific number, we'll get with them and get back with you. Okay?
Is there any other public comment? Great. I think there's someone out there as well also, so.
My name is Catherine Perry Prevost. I'm with Bonnie Friend Neighborhood Association, and I also work with Waterwise Gulf South. And you do know, a lot of you that's sitting up around this table understand that we are doing green infrastructure inside of our communities. So how are you going to define equitable, fairness, affordable? Because when I'm listening at this and looking at what you're serving us to look at, it doesn't seem equitable, it doesn't seem fair, and it doesn't seem affordable. Because a lot of our residents inside of our communities, like you were saying, are renters. They might not get the fee, but what the water bill is gonna look like when they have to pay the water bill. Or what it's gonna look like for us that are putting French drains down in green infrastructure around inside of our community. What is it gonna look like for those residents that own their homes that are exempt? Some of them are exempt, some of them are seniors that have a budget that they are living on right now. And we understand we need the storm drains, but what is it gonna cost us actually? That's the cost, that's the question that I have. I see what y'all doing here, and the third one, I don't agree with at all.
say that one more
So
time?
please think about us. And when you do residential engagement, don't just do it in a district where they're gonna put it in one particular space where the residents can't get out to it. That's very important. That's not residential engagement, that's just somebody signing the sheet and getting the numbers. So you really need to think about that also.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. We have another comment?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. I'm Cheryl Austin. I'm a Tremere resident, but I'm also the Executive Director of Greater Tremere Consortium. And my comments are when the discussion began last year or year before last about a stormwater fee, we did a little investigation with the New Orleans Assessor's Office just to find out nonprofits are exempt, 501c3s, but I had no idea that there are 23 categories. Yes, for exemptions. I don't know the acreage, but there's a lot of properties that are tax exempt. My organization being one of them. We are very small. We have 4 properties. That's also very small. But I'm standing here today to say we are willing to pay our fair share.
Thank you.
We're not a university, we're not a hospital, we're not a governmental agency. Those sites have a lot of green space, more green space, I think, than pavement or asphalt. So a stormwater fee may not affect them as much as it would affect some other sites or buildings. So I don't think that would be fair. I think we need to go back and look at these nonprofits or entities, some are federal fraternities, hospitals, religious churches. I'm sorry, I love God. Yes, I do. But if we are talking about staying in the city, flooding is an issue, a big issue in Treme, then we all need to look at how we can make it better, how we can reduce the flooding. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I just want to assure you, these comments do not just go away. We make note of them, and we're going to be looking at them. And as we continue to have this discussion, please continue to come to these meetings, and hopefully you'll hear how we've addressed them. So thank you so much for coming today.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, I think if I may add quickly too, I think today is a starting point really in terms of presenting the work that we've done so far. But as you can see, we're not sharing details because we don't want to, it's not that we don't want to share them, it's that we haven't developed them yet. And so I think that your comments are really important in helping us develop those. So as we continue to work towards this, hopefully you'll see that your comments are reflected in the work that we're doing.
Great.
I think we have one more.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Supak with WaterWise Gulf South. My comment, I have a question actually. And does the Sewage and Water Board have an active stormwater drainage plan for the city?
Yes, we, for our major drainage system, yes, we do.
Okay,
That's,
great.
that's used and associated with the Southeast Urban Flood Control Program.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's made to the public, general public, that they could read through this plan strategy?
It's, I would say the master plan is a compilation of many master plans that go back to the 1960s.
Got it. So I think that is going to be key. As already just reading this, we do a lot of community engagement outreach. Been doing this for the last 12 years around stormwater management. This is a very complicated topic for even myself a lot of times. So I think community outreach is going to be really key. I don't think 3 meetings are going to get us far, especially, yeah, and especially with asking people to pay more money. I think a strategic plan that is not full of jargon, that residents understand, and seeing how much flooding is happening in the neighborhoods where they can actually see some results from what this drainage fee or what millages are going to actually provide them at the end of the day. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Any other final questions or comments?
Are there any online comments? There are no online comments.
Okay, thank you so much. If there are no other matters, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Any questions?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We are now adjourned. Okay.